Yo, it's your boy Logos, and today I want to react to the top 10 generals of all time, according to his new YouTube channel that I just discovered. I'm not sure how they got the criteria or the basis for these rankings, but I'm curious to see what the top 10 is. I often reference my love for history and how I think it helps shape the world and tells very interesting stories, and I think this video will help showcase that as we talk about some of these great generals, the stuff that they did, and the impact it had on the world today. Not a lot of people care about history, and even less so about military history. It seems like nowadays history is just used for political means, but in my opinion, I just love history for the lessons, the stories, and just for the overall strategy and tactics, especially when it comes to military history. Personally, I have Julius Caesar, Napoleon, and I have to pick like somebody more modern, but now I'm gonna just go with Alexander the Great. Those are my top three generals: Alexander the Great, Napoleon, and Julius Caesar. And I wouldn't be surprised if Napoleon is on this top list, or at least number one, simply because of the fact he won so many battles, he changed military tactics and history, and just the arrangement of armies. He dominated Europe, and he did so many other different things. But hopefully this video could teach us something new, and I could provide some interesting commentary or feedback. So let's get into it.
Someone went and moneyballed military history. Ethan Arsht applied the principles of baseball sabermetrics to the performances of history's greatest generals' ability to win battles, and he came up with a list of the 10 best generals of all time. The math is tricky, but the list is definitive. There are just a few caveats. Although an imperfect source, Arsht compiled Wikipedia data from 3,580 battles and 6,619 generals. He then compiled lists of key commanders, total forces, and of course, the outcome. The general's forces were categorized and his numerical advantage or disadvantage weighted to reflect tactical ability. The real power is ranking the general's war score, or wins above replacement. The more battles a commander fought and won, the more opportunities to raise their scores. But fighting fewer battles didn't necessarily help. There were some surprises in the model, like the apparent failures of generals like Robert E. Lee. For more modern generals like Patton, who didn't make the top 10, the relatively small number of battles commanded attributed to their absence. For more about Arsht's results, responses to criticism, and his findings, check out our website in the link below. Remember, this list has nothing to do with overall strategy, and it's all in good fun, so just take it easy, internet trolls. Okay, let's get started. Number 10, Alexander the Great. Alexander was born in 356 BCE, and he would go on to create one of the largest empires in the ancient world. He earned his first victory in battle at the age of 16 and became the king of Macedonia at the age of 20. Alexander was a great strategist. In fact, he won every battle that he himself commanded. But since his life was cut short and he had only 9 battles from which to draw data, it leaves the model very little to work with. Still, the conqueror of the known world is ranked much higher than other leaders with similar numbers, including the Japanese shogun Tokugawa, German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, and Confederate General J.E.B. Stuart. It should be noted that Alexander's per-battle war average is higher than anyone else's on this list.
In my opinion, I have to put Alexander the Great in at least the top 5, simply because of the fact of the odds he was going against. He was going against the Achaemenid Persian Empire. This empire was, I think, from the Middle East, modern day Middle East, Anatolia, modern day Armenia, Turkey, all the way to India. So this is an enormous amount of space Alexander the Great had to conquer. Here is one caveat against him. He had, without a doubt, a professional army that was trained by his father, Philip II of Macedon. Honestly, Philip II of Macedon should be talked about a lot more than he is, but he isn't because of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is so amazing and so, well, that's another thing too. A lot about these generals on this list and throughout history, the very best generals have great sub-generals. Like many sub-generals of like Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, all these guys I just mentioned, their sub-commanders could have been great generals on their own, and overshadowed them if Alexander the Great or Napoleon or such and so forth didn't exist. That's the thing too. Like Alexander the Great did draw out these battles. He did lay out plans, but he also had people like Parmenion, Seleucus, Antiochus, all these people that came up with the Diadochi the generals and the empires that came after Alexander the Great's death, those was very competent, highly skilled, highly respected generals in their own right. And that did definitely help Alexander the Great conquer most of the known world. But I still got to put him in the top five. Just the Battle of Gaugamela, some of these crazy river crossings he would do, like their audacity, but also the tactics and the strategy behind it were just amazing. I almost want to say second to none, but you have Napoleon, you have Julius Caesar, so let's keep going.
Number 9. Georgie Shukov.
That's a good
Georgie
one.
Konstantinovich Shukov is perhaps the most acclaimed Soviet commander from World War II. His victory at the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, is remembered as the turning point in the war against the Germans, and his assault against Berlin in 1945 hastened the end of the war. Shukov
I would disagree, unless my knowledge of the timeline is messed up. But from my understanding, because it just makes sense, Stalingrad happened, and the Russians get pushed back until Stalingrad. So I would say Stalingrad was a turning point in the war. If Stalingrad would have fallen, I would imagine that the Nazi Germany would have just kept pushing further into Russia. But the fact that they stopped at Stalingrad, got surrounded, many of their armies, and got decimated or quote unquote liquidated after getting surrounded, I would say that's a turning point. Because from that point going forward, it's all Russia pushing closer to Germany, to the heartland of Germany. So I don't know, maybe you could say curse, but unless my timeline is messed up, I would personally just say Stalingrad. The amount of bloodshed, the amount of suffering, all the troops, just everything that were involved into that multi-month battle, I would just say that's much more of a pivotal part in the war compared to Kursk. But I would say Kursk is definitely after that.
has only one more battle than Alexander, and his overall score barely squeaks by the Macedonian. Interestingly enough, his score is far, far above that of General Douglas MacArthur or Confederate Generals Jubal Early and John Bell Hood. That's
that
what
makes sense.
overcoming the odds does for your war score. Number 8. Frederick the Great. Frederick II ruled Prussia, a powerful kingdom within the Germanic Empire during the 18th century.
She tried to oversimplify it. Prussia is like modern day Germany didn't exist until the late 1800s or mid 1800s. Before that, it was like city kingdoms. So you had Prussia, well, not necessarily city kingdoms, because Prussia wasn't like a city kingdom, but you had other smaller states that made up Germany, kind of similar to the Holy Roman Empire, where they had like a huge empire, but they still had like sub states within the Holy Roman Empire, and they would elect the Holy Roman Emperor. So the German Empire didn't exist at the time of Frederick the Great. The German Empire would exist, and I would say the main land of the German Empire is in fact Prussia, but she just kind of oversimplified it to try to make it seem like Prussia was within the German Empire, which already existed, which definitely didn't exist at the time.
His military prowess expanded Prussian lands, and his political influence brought Prussia to the front of European affairs. Ruling for more than 40 years and commanding troops in some 14 battles across Europe earned the enlightened Prussian ruler the number 8 spot on this list. His per-battle average was also lower than Alexander's, but on the whole, he was just a better tactician. Number 7. Ulysses S Grant. Ulysses S. Grant led the Union Army to victory during the American Civil War and went on to serve as President of the United States from 1869 to 1877. Grant's performance commanding Union troops in 16 battles earned him the 7th spot on this list, as well as the U.S. presidency. Although his performance on the battlefield is clearly much better than those of his contemporaries, it should be noted that his Civil War arch-rival, Robert E. Lee, is so far below him on the list that he actually has a negative score.
I'm curious why, because of course I don't support slavery. Like, why the hell would I support somebody slaving myself? But Robert E. Lee was a good tactician. Here's another thing. Just because there's two different types of generals. You have great tacticians and then you have great strategists. And then sometimes you get both. Ulysses S. Grant was more of a great strategy, like great grand strategy in terms of using supplies and maneuvering. Well, not necessarily maneuvering. I'll still take that back. That's more tactician type of a general. But like supplies and coming up with a grand strategy to choke your enemy slowly over time, compared to being straight up in the battle and using maneuvering or the high ground or using tricks with your forces, like hiding them. Like there's different types of generals that are good at different types of things. That's what made Napoleon so great. He was a great tactician and he was a great overall strategist. General George Washington and President George Washington, he was a great like strategic general. He wasn't a good tactical general. He would mess up many times. He would fall for the same trap many times in the American Revolution. But overall, in terms of keep your army together and your pure gravitas and your pure generalship in that manner, he is a great general. But there are different types of generals depending on what they're good at and what they're not good at. Robert E. Lee, I can't remember, there was another general just like him. But there are generals that can get many good battles and win many different battles, but they can't use those battles in such a way that they can actually achieve overall victory. And if you don't achieve overall victory in the war, no matter what your war is about, that's what I'm talking about, any war right here, not just a civil American war. If you can't achieve the overall objectives, you're just throwing lives away at a certain point. Like, yes, you're winning battles, but you're not winning the war. So you're just gonna keep fighting over and over again until you suddenly lose troops, lose support, lose food, lose ammunition, and that gonna happen eventually because you can't just fight over and over again. You're putting strain on your economy and your people when you're going to war.
Number 6, Hannibal Barca.
Yes.
Hannibal is notoriously considered one of the greatest military strategists of all time, and the greatest enemy Rome ever.
I swear, I love history. You don't need to change history for me as a black man to love it. Hannibal isn't
the
fucking
greatest
black.
Military strategist.
Hannibal came from Carthage. Carthage was a colony of the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were Greek. Hannibal Barca was a Greek man. He might have had like a darker skin tone because of maybe the era that he like grew up in, and maybe over time, but he wasn't like a dark African. He was Greek. He might have had like a little more of a tan, but I've not heard, read, or seen anywhere outside these BS History Channel shows or BS history videos saying that Hannibal was black. He was Greek. It just is what it is. But in my opinion, he is also top 5. It's hard to have a top 5 when you have so many generals from the modern era, the classical era, ancient era, medieval era, such and so forth. But if you just have a top 10 of just ancient, classical, and medieval generals, I would have to put Hannibal top 3, or at least top 5, because you have Julius Caesar and such and so forth. But what he did crossing the Alps, how he destroyed them at like Tresemme, at Cannae, he's just that damn good. The only way the Romans had it correct, and by Romans I mean one Roman general, the Fabian. I can't remember his full name, but Fabian. He deployed the Fabian strategy, was basically not fight Hannibal, keep backing up, keep retreating, forcing Hannibal use his supplies, lose support, and then he'll eventually starve himself out or force himself to leave. But if you fight him one-on-one or head-on, you're gonna lose to Hannibal, and that's the only way Rome was able to survive long enough for Carthage to fall apart. Because here's the thing, Hannibal never lost, but from my memory from the Second Punic War, at least the Second Punic War, and maybe even the third, well, he did lose at the final battle against Scipio, I think, but I wouldn't even consider that his fault. But Hannibal, when he was fighting in Italy against Rome, he never lost. He was consistently winning and consistently tricking Rome over and over and over again. Rome won because they was able to beat his brothers in Spain and Africa and in other places. They stopped trying to fight Hannibal head on to defeat him. They said, let's just defeat everybody else, and then he'll have nobody else support him, and he'll go away. And that's kind of technically what happened, because Carthage lost, we got Rome, and we are where we are.
Of all time, and the greatest enemy Rome ever faced. Born in 247 BCE, he was a general of ancient Carthage, known for his conquest of Hispania, the Second Punic War, and the Roman Seleucid War. Hannibal, once captured by Scipio Africanus, is believed to have given his own ranking system to Scipio once the two started talking. His personal assessment wasn't far off from the truth. He listed Alexander the Great and himself as best, both of whom are in the top 10, even centuries later. Number 5, Halid ibn al-Walid. Al-Walid was a companion of the Prophet Muhammad and one of the Islamic Empire's most capable military commanders. His leadership united Arabia under a single leader for the first time in history. He's known for commanding the forces of the Rashidun army under Muhammad and his successors of the Rashidun Caliphate. It's rumored that he fought in over 100 conflicts and skirmishes, but he's best remembered for 14 significant battles, in which he remained undefeated against the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Persians, and helped spread Islam to the greater Middle East. Compared to others who fought similar numbers of battles, his score eclipses even Frederick the Great.
Okay, so I don't really know much about Khalid. I do know, and I'm actively learning about the excuse me, the Byzantine Empire. So from my understanding of Byzantine history, the Islamic explosion, and how that very much pushed the Byzantines back all out of the Middle East, and then subsequent caliphates causing Byzantine to fall. I have no faults with them saying him. I need to learn more about him. If he has 14 battles and he's undefeated, that means he was kicking Byzantine and Sassanid Persian ass. So there's no doubt he's one of the greatest generals of all time. Just going off of that alone. The Sassanid Persian Empire was around for hundreds of years from my understanding and my memory. The Byzantine Empire is honestly the Roman Empire, but just the eastern half of it. So you have culture, you have tradition of military. It's a very, very strong and rich empire, the Byzantines. So the fact that he was able to push them out of Arabia, the Middle East, and also help collapse the Sassanid Persian Empire, like, who could argue against him?
Number 4, Takita Singen.
Another good
Being
one.
one of the best military minds in feudal Japan is really a big deal, because almost everyone seemed to be a military mind, and being better than someone else might mean you get challenged to a duel. After 18 battles, the Tiger of Kai reigned supreme, in Japan anyway. During the 14th century, Takita Singen was a prominent daimyo, or feudal lord, renowned for his military prowess and aggressive tactics in battle. His domestic policies, including systems of law, taxation, and administration, were later incorporated into the shogunate that would unite Japan. Number 3.
I don't know that much about Takeda Shingen as I would like to. I know a little bit more about Oda Nobunaga, but Takeda Shingen was a very amazing general. And from my understanding, his origin story of taking over that clan, I don't think he was actually like a heir of that clan previously, like the previous daimyo. I think the daimyo had heirs or sons himself, and they was too weak. And then the people of, I think, Takeda or that clan came to him and asked him to take over that clan. And then he ended up being very successful, prosperous, and he fought in the Sengoku Jidai, which means the Warring States period, which is where you get Oda Nobunaga and many other amazing generals.
Arthur
Oda
Wellesley,
Nobu should be on this
first Duke
list.
of Wellington. Though he would become Prime Minister, Wellesley is best known for his military accolades. It's a pretty big deal to be the guy who delivered a solid defeat to the man they called Master of Europe. Napoleon's old nemesis, the Duke of Wellington commanded famous victories during the Napoleonic Wars, including the defeat of Bonaparte at Waterloo. Like Takita Singen, his nearest challenger on this list, the Duke saw command of 18 battles, but his war score is considerably higher. Number 2.
That's another thing. People only seem to remember Wesley about Waterloo, but he fought in Spain against Napoleon. Maybe not directly, but I think one of the main reasons why, outside of Russia, why Napoleon ended up getting defeated is because of Spain. It was kind of like the modern day Vietnam, or the not ancient Napoleonic Vietnam for him, because of the guerrilla warfare, the atrocities, the lack of control over the nation, such a big peninsula. And honestly, if he didn't have to keep funneling troops into Spain with the help of Wesley, who was helping the Spanish, I think it would have been even harder. He could have maybe even recovered from Russia because he would have had those troops still that he had to put into Spain. And I think at one point, from my memory, while he was like actually in Spain trying to take control over it, there was an emergency in Europe he had to go and rush to. Either it was in France or Paris itself. But yeah, Wesley definitely deserves to be on this list, and he is a great general outside of just Waterloo.
Julius Caesar.
This is my man
Before
right here.
he declared himself dictator for life and found himself infamously murdered by all of his friends, Julius Caesar expanded the Roman Republic through conquests across modern Europe. Caesar didn't have command in as many battles as Singen or the Duke of Wellington, but his war score reflects a lot more risk and...
If the dude got 18, I guess not. Like, you have Egypt, you have the civil war against Pompey, you have him in France, you have him in Spain. You have you have him in Britain. Like I'm trying to think. Like I think he has more than 18, but I don't know. It's hard to know exactly. Everybody knows the big ones, like Dyrrhachium and Elysia, but his tactics and his maneuvering is him and Napoleon tactics, maneuvering, and beating your enemy before you even go to battle just because of your positioning and the way you're arranging your troops and your army. That's what separates the great generals from just the rest for me. I read this book called Strategy by B.H. Liddell Hart, and he talks about the act of maneuvering and winning before you even get to the point of battle. Just because of the fact that if an enemy was to face you at this location, how you arrange and how you set up, they're never gonna lose. And if you're gonna have major armies feeding multiple different people, supply lines and communication lines matter so much more than it does actually fighting the battle, because you could just starve somebody out or break their will to fight before you even get to battle. And that's what Julius Caesar would do. That's what Napoleon would do. They wouldn't just straight up fight you head on. They would pick a battle place and they would get it such a way that you couldn't help but fight them, and you couldn't help but fight them on their terms. Julius Caesar, his thing at Elysia, having a double envelopment. So he was putting a settlement to siege and he enveloped the walls of that settlement. But then a relief army from that settlement or allies of that settlement was coming to stop Caesar. So he put up another set of walls to block his army from the outside, but also closing in the inside settlement. And he was able to fight on both sides and defend himself from pressure on the outside and within and not collapse. And he did this, what, hundreds of miles or maybe even more from Rome or bases of support. So I have no problem with him being number two because it could only be Napoleon number one.
Shrewdness in his battlefield tactics. But even Caesar couldn't top Alexander's per battle war average. Number 1, Napoleon Bonaparte. Yes, you might have guessed by now, but the number one spot belongs to l'Empereur. Napoleon is so far ahead of the normal distribution curve created by the data for these 6,000 plus generals, it's not even close. After 43 battles, he has a war score of more than 16, which blows the competition away. There could be no question. The man responsible for conquering an enormous expanse of Europe during the 19th century is the greatest tactical general of all time.
Without a doubt. And I'm glad she said tactical general, because the way he would fight battles and set up battles was amazing. And he literally rewrote how to do generalship. He rearranged the French army. Oh, here's another thing against him. Since I did mention this about Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, he had I think Gallienus. He had a very good sub command. He had multiple good sub commanders. Some that was always on his side, some who wasn't when he went against Rome and crossed the Rubicon. But Napoleon, he had Marshal Ney, who could be on this list. He has so many good generals. It's crazy Genghis Khan not up here. Subadai, he should be on this list, honestly. Like, you can't fit in everybody, but Subadai, what he did from crossing over so many miles from Mongolia, going into Europe, winning every single battle, and communicating with vast armies over great land masses, not using modern technology, but just the technology at the time, and consecutively tricking nations. That's another thing too. He wasn't just a dumb, I don't know, because that's how the European army saw him, like a dumb barbarian at the time. That's not the case. He used strategy and tactics to win. In fact, he would break up armies by using tricks or diplomacy. That way, an army that was outnumber him maybe 2-1, he would pay them some money. He would use some mind games. He would do some tricks or negotiations and get some of those armies to break off. And then he'll fight that battle on his terms and win handily. And he did this hundreds, thousands of miles away from Mongolia. Honestly, who knows how the world would look if Genghis Khan didn't call him back or Genghis Khan didn't pass away. Because at that point, from my memory, Subadai, he was moving into Russia and he was going to go into like Europe, Eastern Europe. But if Genghis Khan didn't die, like who knows? Who knows what language they be speaking in Europe right now? That's just a common thing. So many of these great generals have amazing sub commanders that are competent, but also these generals like Napoleon, like Alexander the Great, like Genghis Khan. They know and see these great commanders, and they choose to pick them to be on their staff. Zubeldai, um, and I think Jebe, the Arrow, two commanders like I just mentioned under Genghis Khan. I think they was both like fighting against him at one point, while Genghis Khan was on his rise up to being the Khan of Mongolia and all the other empire that he acquired. Like those was actual enemies against him. And instead of killing them when he got the chance, because from my memory, Jebe, who I think the nickname was the Arrow, he shot an arrow at Genghis Khan and shot the horse out from under Genghis Khan, and he got captured. And Genghis Khan didn't kill him or execute him. He chose to employ him because he saw how useful and good he was. That's something that these great generals do. It just happens over and over again.
And the math proves it. So that's our list. Leave us a comment and let us know if anyone on here surprised you.
That's a really good video. It's hard to have everybody in because you have so much time, and then you have to compare people with different armies, different situations. Like I said, Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Julius Caesar. They was born into armies. Well, not necessarily born into, like how, Julius Caesar wasn't born into a commandship, same way that Alexander the Great was, but it was born into empires or kingdoms that already had great armies for whatever reason, and they was able to use those armies for better means through themselves because of their strategy, their intellect, the sub generals. But then you have other people like Takita Shingen or Ulysses S Grant or Halid, who led together people that weren't professional armies or professional soldiers. Sometimes they were volunteers or tribal people or stuff like that, who didn't have the best organization or the best understanding of tactics or trust in their general to have good morale and not run away. And they still was able to overcome that, train great armies, and win excuse me, and win numerous battles. So it's hard to make a list like this, but overall, I'm happy they put Napoleon at the top. Then you have Caesar right under him. And I would have put Wesley at third, but it's hard to take it serious as like a defender of 1 through 10 if you have Alexander the Great at 10th. But Wesley deserves to be on this list too, even though you could switch out a few good people. I wouldn't want to switch out Khalid simply because of the fact he defeated the Byzantines and Sassanid Persians. That's not a small feat. It's seriously not. The Sassanid Persians and the Byzantines have been going to war with each other and other people for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's no small feat what he did, especially considering the fact what I said earlier, he didn't have a professional army. He was leading groups of tribes, people who probably did fight in wars previously, but not the same as, Alexander the Great and his generals and his cavalry and his pikemen, his phalanx, such and so forth. It's just hard to compare these generals because of so many different circumstances. Plus, we can't know definitely of what they did. You have propaganda, you have lies, you have BS, you have over exaggeration with numbers, but overall, I think it's a really good list. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Also, let me know if you enjoyed this. I love military history. I love dissecting and talking about it. And hopefully this maybe inspired you to learn something more, because I'm probably going to check out Khalid and Frederick the Great some more, because those are two people I'm very weak on compared to, Napoleon, Ulysses, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, who's my favorite historical figure. Oh yeah, I meant to say this at the start. Marcus Agrippa does get enough credit for what he did. In my opinion, Caesar Augustus wasn't going to be Augustus if it wasn't for Agrippa winning these wars and battles over and over again. And he should be on more top lists. Hopefully we can get some videos on him in the future. Maybe if you're interested in that, I'll definitely do it. But that's it for now. It's your boy Logos. Like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And I'll see you next time. Peace.